Millionaire comes home early, finds his wife kicking the cleaning lady's black daughter. What he does shocks everyone. The sound of Vivian's high heels echoed across the marble floor of the mansion before the dull thud of something small hitting the wall. Her useless brat. How many times do I have to tell her not to touch my things? Jonathan Rivers stopped at the entrance to the living room, still holding the keys to his Bentley. Her board meeting had ended 2 hours early, and he had decided to return home to enjoy Friday afternoon with his family. What he saw left him paralyzed. Lana, only 8 years old, was cowering in the corner of the room, tears streaming down her face as she held a broken vase. Blood trickled from a small cut on her knee. Vivian, his wife of 3 years, stood over the girl with an expression of pure hatred Jonathan had never seen before. "Do you know how much that vase cost, you little brat?" Vivian pointed her manicured finger at the child's face. "More than her mother earns in a year cleaning this house." Jonathan had known Lana since she was a little girl. Carmen, his mother, had worked as a cleaner in the mansion for almost a decade, since before his first marriage. The girl had always been polite, intelligent, and curious. She sometimes came to work with her mother during school vacations, and Jonathan always enjoyed her presence in the house. "Please, Mrs. Vivian." Lana's small voice trembled. "I was just trying to help clean up." The vase slipped out of my hand when I heard the loud noise from the television. "Liar." Vivian raised her hand as if to slap his child. It was at that moment that something inside Jonathan awakened. It wasn't just anger. It was crystal clear clarity about who the woman he had married really was. For 3 years, Vivian had been the perfect wife in front of him and their guests. Polite, elegant, always saying the right words at social events. But now, thinking she was alone with a defenseless child, she was showing her true colors. "Vivian." Jonathan's voice cut through the air like a knife. She turned quickly, her face instantly shifting from cruelty to a look of feigned surprise. "Jonathan, dear, I didn't hear you come in. This girl just broke the Ming vase that her mother gave us as a wedding gift." Jonathan watched the scene with new eyes. Lana cowering, the cut on her knee, the girl's defensive posture, everything indicated that this was not an isolated accident. His executive meetings had taught her to read body language, and what she saw there was the fear of someone who had been through this before. "Lana," Jonathan said softly, completely ignoring Vivian, "are you hurt?" The girl looked nervously between Jonathan and Vivian before nodding timidly. "Where is his mother?" "He went to the market to buy cleaning supplies for the kitchen," Lana replied in a voice that was almost inaudible. Jonathan knelt down to the girl's height, keeping his distance so as not to scare her further. "How long has Mrs. Vivian been talking to you like this when I'm not home?" The silence that followed was more revealing than any answer. Vivian cleared her throat uncomfortably. "Jonathan, you're overreacting. It was just an accident, and I was explaining to her that she needs to be more careful." But Jonathan couldn't take his eyes off Lana. There was something in the girl's expression, a forced maturity, a caution that 8-year-olds shouldn't have. It was the look of someone who had learned to anticipate danger, to measure every move to avoid outbursts of anger. "Has she been harsh with him other times?" Jonathan asked gently. Lana looked at Vivian, then at the floor. The fear in her eyes told Jonathan everything he needed to know. At that moment, Jonathan Rivers, CEO of a technology company valued at $500 million, realized that he had been completely deceived for 3 years. More importantly, he realized that a child had been suffering abuse in her own home while he was working to build an empire. The expression on Vivian's face changed subtly when she noticed that Jonathan was not accepting her version of events. For a second, the same cruel look that she had directed at Lana flashed across his eyes before being quickly replaced by a mask of wounded innocence. But Jonathan had seen it, and now that he knew the kind of person he had really brought into his home, some memories began to fit together in a disturbing way. The days when Carmen seemed too tense, the times when Lana was too quiet when Vivian was around, the seemingly innocent comments about properly educating the employees' children. If you're wondering how a smart man could be deceived for so long, be sure to subscribe to the channel to find out how far a person's ability to manipulate those who trust them can go, and especially to see what happens when that mask finally comes off. "Jonathan, you're being dramatic," Vivian theatrically, adjusting her platinum blonde hair with calculatedly feminine gestures. Her broke a priceless piece. Someone needs to teach these children responsibility, or they'll grow up thinking they can do whatever they want. Jonathan noticed how she pronounced her children with a particular disdain he had never noticed before. 3 years of marriage, and only now did he notice the small signs he had completely ignored. Lana, Jonathan said gently, ignoring Vivian's angry look. Can you tell me exactly what happened? The girl looked nervously between the two adults. I was helping clean the living room like I always do when I come with Mom. I heard a really loud noise coming from the TV and got scared. When I turned around quickly, my elbow hit the vase. Her lie, Vivian interrupted sharply. I saw her playing with the vase, pretending it was a microphone. These kids have no idea of the value of things. Jonathan knelt down to Lana's height. What kind of noise did you hear on the television? It was a lady yelling very loudly at a little girl on the screen. The lady said very mean things to the girl, like Luana stopped, looking at Vivian with obvious fear. Like what, sweetie? Jonathan asked gently. Like Mrs. Vivian talks to me when Mom goes out to buy things. The answer came out in an almost inaudible whisper. Jonathan felt a chill run down his spine. How long has this been going on, Lana? Vivian cleared her throat loudly. Jonathan, this is ridiculous. Are you going to believe the fantasies of a spoiled child? She's clearly trying to divert attention from what she did. But Jonathan kept his focus on Lana. Can you tell me other times this has happened? The girl lowered her eyes. Mrs. Vivian said that if I told anyone, Mom would lose her job and we wouldn't have money for food. She said that people like us should be grateful to be here and not cause trouble. Jonathan felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. People like he poor people, and Lana hesitated, touching her own dark skin. Go on, Jonathan encouraged her. People are color. Mrs. Vivian said, I should always remember his place because girls like him can't afford to break important people's things. The silence that followed was piercing. Jonathan looked at Vivian, who had completely lost the sweet expression she always kept in front of him. For a moment, her social mask fell completely, revealing something cold and calculating that made Jonathan question whether he really knew the woman he had shared a bed with for 3 years. This is a misunderstanding, Vivian said quickly, noticing Jonathan's piercing gaze. I was just trying to teach her appropriate boundaries. Carmen is an excellent employee, but sometimes she lacks supervision with her daughter. Supervision. Jonathan repeated slowly. At that moment, they heard the front door open. Carmen had returned from the market. Jonathan watched as Lana instantly stiffened and as Vivian quickly recomposed her expression into her usual sweet mask. Jonathan. Lana. Carmen called from the hallway. Did something happen? Carmen entered the room carrying brown paper bags and immediately noticed the tension in the air. His eyes went straight to his daughter's bruised knee, then to the broken porcelain on the floor, and finally to Vivian's icy expression. Jonathan saw something in Carmen he had never noticed before, the same controlled fear he saw in Lana's eyes. How had he been so blind for so long? Carmen, Vivian said in a honeyed voice. Her daughter had a little accident with the Ming vase. Fortunately, she wasn't seriously hurt, but we need to talk about proper supervision when she comes to work with you. Carmen slowly lowered the bags. Lana, are you okay, sweetheart? I'm fine, Mom, Lana replied automatically, but Jonathan noticed how she avoided her mother's gaze. Carmen, Jonathan said calmly, can you take Lana to the kitchen? I need to bandage that wound. Vivian and I will talk here. Carmen nodded quickly, taking her daughter's hand. But before they left, Jonathan saw the exchange of glances between mother and daughter. A silent communication that spoke of shared fear and long-held secrets. As soon as they were alone, Vivian immediately changed tactics. Jonathan, dear, you're letting a simple situation become unnecessary drama. Children make up stories, especially when they want to avoid consequences. Consequences? Jonathan crossed his arms. What kind of consequences has he been enforcing in my absence? Basic discipline, Vivian replied, her voice losing some of its artificial sweetness. Someone needs to teach this girl about respect and responsibility. Carmen is too permissive, and you felt it was her responsibility to do that. Vivian looked at him as if he were a child asking an obvious question. Jonathan, I am the lady of this house. It is her duty to maintain order and proper standards, especially with the children of the servants. The way she said employees' children revealed a social hierarchy that Jonathan had never realized she maintained. He began to wonder how many other things he had missed in the last 3 years. What proper standards? He asked. Respect for property, knowledge of appropriate social boundaries, gratitude for the generosity they receive by being allowed here. Vivian gestured around the mansion as if it were obvious. Jonathan felt a disturbing clarity settling in. Viv Lana is 8 years old, exactly the right age to learn about social hierarchies. If he learns young, he will be an adult better adjusted to the realities of the world. Realities? Jonathan could hardly believe what he was hearing. Jonathan, be realistic, Vivian sighed impatiently. Carmen is a cleaning lady. Lana will probably follow the same path. It's cruel to give unrealistic hopes to people in certain social positions. I'm just preparing her for real life. It was at that moment that Jonathan realized he hadn't married Vivian. He had married a carefully constructed performance. The woman standing before him now, talking about social hierarchies and appropriate positions for an 8-year-old, was a complete stranger. What if I disagree with her approach, he asked. Vivian laughed, a cold sound Jonathan had never heard before. Jonathan, you work 14 hours a day building your empire. Do you really think you have the time or knowledge to question how I run our home? Jonathan studied his wife's face. Our home? Well, I've been managing all domestic aspects for 3 years. I hire employees, fire them when necessary, set rules and standards. You never cared about these details before. For the first time, Jonathan wondered how many employees Vivian had fired when necessary, and for what reasons. How many families had been harmed by her negligence in properly supervising his own home? Maybe it's time I cared more, he said simply. Vivian studied him for a moment, and Jonathan saw something calculating in her eyes. Of course, dear, but you know how these situations can be complicated. Carmen is a loyal employee, but if she starts causing problems or teaching her daughter to be disrespectful, well, there are a lot of people who need work these days. The threat was subtle, but clear. Jonathan realized he was looking at a woman who used fear and economic insecurity as tools of control. From the kitchen came low voices, Carmen treating Lana's injury while they talked in whispers. Jonathan wondered how many similar conversations had taken place over the past 3 years. How many physical and emotional wounds had been treated in silence? Vivian, he said slowly, I think you and he need to rethink some things about how this house works. She studied him with new eyes, realizing that something had irrevocably changed in the dynamic between them. Jonathan, I hope you're not thinking of making rash decisions based on a child's dramatizations. But Jonathan was no longer listening to his words. He was watching her micro-expressions, the way he chose each word, how he tested the ground to see how far he could push. It was like watching a strategist in action, and he wondered how long he had been manipulated without realizing it. For 3 years, while he was building his company and accumulating wealth, an 8-year-old child had been systematically broken in her own home. And the woman responsible for this was now calculating how to get around her discovery, completely underestimating her ability to react. What Vivian didn't know was that Jonathan Rivers hadn't become a millionaire at 35 by being passive or naive. And she was about to discover that some storms once awakened sweep everything in their path. In the kitchen, Jonathan found Carmen carefully cleaning Lana's cut knee, with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the emotional brutality the girl had suffered minutes before. The conversation between mother and daughter took place in whispers laden with fear and resignation. Carmen, Jonathan said softly, making them both jump. Can we talk? Carmen visibly stiffened. 28 years of cleaning the homes of wealthy families had taught her that conversations like this rarely ended well for people like her. Of course, Mr. Jonathan, if I've done something wrong, you haven't done anything wrong, Jonathan interrupted her. But I need to understand what's been happening here when I'm not home. Lana grabbed her mother's hand, his large eyes fixed on Jonathan's face. Carmen looked nervously toward the room where Vivian remained, clearly calculating the risks of telling the truth versus the danger of lying. Mrs. Vivian, her has specific ways of keeping order in the house, Carmen said carefully, choosing each word as if walking through a minefield. What kind of ways? Carmen exchanged a glance with Lana. It was the girl who spoke, her voice small but determined. Mr. Jonathan, can I tell you the truth? Even if Mrs. Vivian gets very angry. Jonathan knelt down to Lana's height. You can always tell the truth. And I promise that nothing bad will happen to you or your mother because of it. Mrs. Vivian said that children like me need to know our place. Lana began slowly. She said it's very generous of her to let Mom bring a defective black girl into her beautiful home, and that if I didn't behave properly, he would send us away without references. Jonathan felt his jaw tighten. Did she use those exact words? She always talks about how people of our color should be grateful for the opportunities that important people give us, Carmen murmured, finally finding the courage to speak, and that children like Lana need to understand that they will never have the same chances as rich white children. So it's better to learn humility early on. Mom cried last night. Lana added, Mrs. Vivian said she was going to make up a story that Mom was stealing jewelry if we caused any trouble. She showed us a bracelet that she said she was going to hide in our bag. Jonathan felt something cold run down her spine. Carmen, how long has this been going on? Since the first month after she married him, Carmen admitted, tears beginning to stream down his face. But Mr. Jonathan, we need this job. It's just me and Lana and without references. Jonathan understood the perfect trap Vivian had constructed. Carmen was caught between accepting abuse or risking complete financial ruin. And Vivian knew exactly how to exploit that vulnerability. Carmen, I want you to know that his job is secure regardless of what happens with Vivian, Jonathan said firmly. And I want to document everything you've told me. Would you be willing to do that? Before Carmen could respond, Vivian's voice echoed from the living room. Jonathan, honey, where are you? We need to resolve this situation quickly. I have a social engagement in an hour. Jonathan noticed how Lana instinctively cringed when she heard Vivian's voice and how Carmen automatically assumed a submissive posture. 3 years of psychological conditioning had turned her home into a prison for this family. Stay here, Jonathan said. I'm going to get something from my office and then we'll talk again. In his office, Jonathan opened his laptop and began typing rapidly. As CEO, he had dealt with multiple cases of harassment and discrimination at his company, and he knew exactly what kind of documentation would be necessary. But first, he needed professional help. He called Diana Rodriguez, a civil rights lawyer he had met at networking events. It was Friday at 5 p.m., but Diana answered on the second ring. Jonathan, what a surprise. How can I help? Diana, I need her help with something very serious. It involves psychological and racial abuse against an 8-year-old child in my own home. The line went silent for a moment. I'm listening. Jonathan quickly explained the situation. Diana listened without interruption, asking specific questions that demonstrated her experience with similar cases. Jonathan, legally, you are in a strong position to protect Carmen and Lana, but emotionally, the damage has already been done. We need to act quickly and comprehensively, Diana said. Can I be there in 40 minutes? That should be possible. And Jonathan, record everything. Every conversation with Vivian from now on. Her behavior pattern suggests that she will escalate when he feels threatened. While waiting for Diana, Jonathan returned to the kitchen. Carmen and Lana were sitting together talking in whispers. When she saw him, Carmen quickly stood up. Mr. Jonathan, on second thought, maybe it's better not to get involved in this situation. Mrs. Vivian is right about some things. People like us should be grateful. Carmen, Jonathan interrupted her gently. No one, regardless of color or social class, deserves to be treated the way Vivian has treated you, and especially not a child. Lana looked at him with eyes too wise for her age. Mr. Jonathan, can we trust him? Really? The question cut deep. This 8-year-old was questioning whether a grown-up would keep his promises, something that should never be a concern for someone so young. You can trust him, Lana, and I'll prove it to you. At that moment, they heard Vivian talking on the phone in the living room, her voice thick with irritation. Yes, Mom, I know you think I'm being too hard on the employees, but someone has to keep these people in their place. Jonathan is too soft. He doesn't understand how to deal with certain social classes. Jonathan, Carmen, and Lana exchanged glances. Vivian had just revealed that his behavior was not an isolated moment of anger, but a deliberate philosophy that she openly discussed with others. Of course, I'm not going to let Jonathan ruin years of work establishing appropriate boundaries, Vivian continued. If he wants to play social savior, he'll learn that there are consequences. Vivian's phone conversation revealed something disturbing. Not only did she abuse Carmen and Lana, but she had developed specific strategies to neutralize any interference from Jonathan. The tone of her voice suggested that she had plans to deal with the current situation, plans that were unlikely to be pleasant for anyone. Jonathan realized he was dealing with someone far more calculating and potentially dangerous than he had imagined. Vivian wasn't just a prejudiced person losing control. She was a systematic manipulator who had spent 3 years planning and executing a regime of psychological abuse. From the living room came fragments of the phone conversation that suggested Vivian was already mobilizing outside resources for her defense. And from the confident tone of her voice, she clearly believed it would be easy to neutralize any threat Jonathan posed. What she didn't know was that Jonathan Rivers had built a $500 million empire by not being naive about human nature. And when she finally decided to act against an injustice, his response was always meticulously planned and devastatingly effective. While Vivian plotted on the other side of the house, Jonathan quietly documented every word, preparing a counteroffensive that she-her would never see coming. Because some battles are not won with shouting or direct confrontation, they are won with intelligence, resources, and a precise understanding of how power really works in the real world. 20 minutes later, when Diana arrived with 2 private investigators and professional recording equipment, Vivian was still on the phone organizing what clearly appeared to be a smear campaign against Jonathan. Her voice echoed through the house with a confidence that was about to turn into a nightmare. If Jonathan tries to cause me trouble over this ridiculous situation with the employees, we'll activate Plan B. Vivian laughed as she spoke. 3 years of documenting her outbursts of anger and emotional instability will yield a nice alimony settlement. Jonathan signaled to Diana, who immediately began recording. Carmen and Lana remained in the kitchen, but could hear every word through the internal intercom that Jonathan had discreetly activated. Of course, I made up some situations to provoke reactions of his, Vivian continued. Rich men are so predictable when they feel challenged. And now, with this whole story of defending the black maid and her little girl, I can paint him as unstable and unfit to manage her own fortune. Diana raised her eyebrows, whispering to Jonathan, "She's confessing to conspiracy to commit matrimonial fraud. Keep recording." But the best was yet to come. Vivian, completely absorbed in her phone conversation, didn't notice when Jonathan approached the room with a tablet in his hands, streaming the conversation live to his professional LinkedIn profile where he had over 50,000 contacts in the business world. The funniest part is that I managed to make the black girl fear me so much that she wouldn't even dream of telling anyone. Vivian laughed. Kids from that social class are so easy to intimidate. Just threaten the family's financial stability and she becomes completely submissive. The number of views on the live stream had already exceeded 1,000 people, including several CEOs and business leaders Jonathan knew personally. Comments began to appear in real time, expressions of shock and outrage. Jonathan will learn that there are consequences for interfering with my methods of household management, Vivian continued, now clearly lost in her fantasy of control. And if he insists on defending these people, I will make sure that the entire social elite knows what kind of man he really is. Someone who puts employees above his own wife. It was at that moment that Jonathan entered the room, still holding the tablet. Vivian, dear, you have an audience. She turned, the phone still to her ear, and her face instantly palled at the sight of the device in his hands and the growing number of views on the screen. 3,200 people just heard her philosophy on domestic management, Jonathan said calmly, including the board of directors of the Hamilton Charitable Foundation, where she's been volunteering for 2 years. The phone slipped from Vivian's hands, falling to the marble floor with a crash. Her mother was still shouting on the other end of the line. Vivian! Vivian, what's going on? Diana approached, showing her ID. Vivian Ashford. Yes, we know his real name. He is being formally notified of an investigation into psychological abuse, intimidation based on racial discrimination, and conspiracy to commit matrimonial fraud. This is a misunderstanding, Vivian stammered, trying to regain her composure. You're taking his words out of context. Context. Jonathan laughed bitterly. Vivian, you just explained live to thousands of people how psychologically tortured an 8-year-old child for 3 years using his skin color and economic situation as tools of intimidation. At that moment, Carmen entered the room, holding Lana by the hand. The girl looked directly at Vivian, and for the first time in 3 years, there was no fear in her eyes. Miss Vivian, Lana said in a surprisingly firm voice, Mr. Jonathan taught me that people who hurt children are called bullies, and that bullies are only strong when no one is watching. Vivian tried one last gambit. Jonathan, are you going to destroy our life because of one employee? Think about what you're doing. I am thinking, Vivian. I am thinking that for 3 years you have built a regime of psychological terror in my own home, using a child as your victim. Jonathan approached her, her voice controlled but relentless. I am thinking that you have seriously underestimated both my ability to discover the truth and the consequences of your actions. The tablet now showed over 7,000 views and the notifications kept coming. Messages of outrage, expressions of support for Jonathan, and several business contacts cutting ties with any institution Vivian represented. His volunteer services at the Hamilton Foundation have been canceled, Diana informed her, reading from her phone. The Malibu Country Club is revoking your membership, and apparently 3 different charities where you served are removing his name from all promotional materials. Vivian collapsed into an armchair, finally comprehending the magnitude of his downfall. In less than an hour, he had lost his social reputation, his positions in prestigious organizations, and his source of identity based on status and power over others. The best part, Jonathan said, turning off the live stream, is that you did all this yourself. I just provided the platform for the world to know the real Vivian Ashford. Carmen approached Jonathan. Mr. Jonathan, how can we thank him? No need to thank him, Carmen. I apologize for taking 3 years to see what was happening under my own roof. Lana let go of her mother's hand and walked over to Jonathan. Mr. Jonathan, now I understand what Mom always told her about good people. They don't care about the color of our skin or how much money we have. They care if we are good people on the inside. While Vivian remained silent, processing the complete destruction of her social and financial life, one last notification arrived on Jonathan's phone. A reporter from a major local newspaper was requesting an interview about discriminatory practices in the domestic environments of wealthy families. Vivian's downfall was not just beginning. It was about to become a case study in how prejudice and abuse of power can be completely unmasked when the truth finally comes to light. And the most ironic thing of all was that she herself had provided all the evidence necessary for her own destruction, completely underestimating the intelligence and determination of the people he had spent 3 years trying to subjugate.